Welcome back to our study of the book of Exodus for the spring semester of 2026. We're looking at Israel as they came out of Egypt. Their purpose was to start their nation to go back into the promised land as God had told them. Genesis chapter 15, that they would come out of captivity and they would come into the promised land. They reach Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 18 and stay there from chapter 18 through 40 in around 1445 BC. They remained at Mount Sinai for 11 months and 5 days. And during this time, 3 significant events transpired during this time. I believe we talked a little bit about this last time. But that was the Constitution of Moses and the Law of God, the prostitution of Israel, where they turned to the golden calf, and then the restitution of Israel when God gave them the tabernacle. And so Israel is to begin as a nation. The Constitution of Israel, or the Law of God, most people tend to think of the Mosaic Law as just the 10 Commandments, but as you know, there's 613 commandments that they followed. And then the circumstances leading up to this Constitution that would take place in chapter 20. Back in chapter 18, 1 through 12, we see the circumstances here. When Jethro, the priest of Midian, remember, Midianites were descendants of Abraham, not through Jacob, or Isaac and Jacob, but no, Abraham's wife Keturah. Priest Jethro was Moses' father-in-law. He heard all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, and the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her back. Now, after he sent her back, it refers to Moses sending her back. Remember in Exodus chapter 4, apparently there was a great fight between Moses and Zipporah over circumcision. And so she performs the ritual of circumcision, and Moses then apparently sends her back to her father's house. And then he goes down into Egypt and leads the children of Israel out. Now, finally on their way back, Jethro hears about Israel's coming. Every night they could see the fire. In the daytime they could probably see the cloud where they were at. And so they went to meet them. Verse 3, and her 2 sons, about Moses and Zipporah's 2 sons, which one was Gershom, for he said, I've been an alien in a strange land. And the other was Eleazar, for the God of my father, he said, was mine help. And he delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife unto Moses into the wilderness, where he encamped at the mount of God. And he said unto Moses, I thy father-in-law Jethro, am come unto thee, and thy wife, and her 2 sons with her. And Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and did obeisance, and kissed him. And they asked each other their welfare, and they came into the tent. And Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done unto Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and all the travail that had come upon them by the way, and how the Lord delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel, whom he had delivered out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who hath delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians, and out of the hand of Pharaoh, who hath delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, for in the thing which they dealt proudly, he was above them. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for God. And Aaron came, and all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. So you had a family reunion take place in chapter 18. Of course, the welcome here by Jethro and Zipporah. Rejoice over Israel's deliverance. Then the wisdom. In chapter 18, verse 13 and 14. Moses, as the leader of Israel, and this was God's plan for Israel, that they had judges in the land. Not only as in the book of Judges, but the kings were to be judges, and the leadership were to be the judges, kind of a court system. It came to pass tomorrow that Moses sat to judge the people. Whatever argument they had one with another, if they couldn't handle it, they would take it ultimately to Moses, where he would handle it. And so they came before Moses from the morning into the evening. So apparently this is all he could do all day long, was to judge people. Well, Moses' father-in-law saw that all he did to the people, he said, "What is this thing that thou doest to the people? Why sittest thou thyself alone, and all the people stand by thee from morning into evening?" In other words, Moses, you can't handle this situation all by yourself. There's just not enough hours in the day for you to do this. You need to appoint people. Well, Jethro's right was to select capable men to help judge. And then each judge was appointed 1,000 people. Well, Moses went up to God, and the Lord called unto him out of the mountain, saying, "Thus shalt thou say to the house of Jacob, and tell the children of Israel, Yet ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if you obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar people, a peculiar treasure, unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests, and a holy nation. These are the words which thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel." Well, Moses listened to Jethro, and he listened to God, and he appointed 70 leaders, 70 elders, to judge the people. So if you go back to chapter 18 here, each judge was appointed 1,000 people. So you had 70 judges who would judge over 70,000 people if the situations needed that many that day. It all depends on how many they needed. If there's more than that, then it may take several days. But of course, then again, not every issue would last all day long. It might just took 15, 20, 30 minutes to handle each situation. So, a good system. Moses listened to his father-in-law, but more importantly, Moses listened to God. And I think we have here a clear case where it's important to listen to godly people. We can't handle it on our own. We have to delegate responsibilities. I knew a man, he was a pastor of a church. He's been with the Lord now for 35 years. Now, but he was a great man, a great brother in the Lord, a great Bible teacher, knew his Bible. But he was pastoring a church, and the church he was pastoring, I don't know if it was him, I don't know if it was the church, but he just could not delegate authority. I mean, it was his responsibility to turn the heat on in the wintertime or the air conditioner on. It was his responsibility to take care of the lawn mowed or whatever. He had to handle everything, and he just could not delegate authority. And like I said, I don't know whose fault it was, but it's always going to be a problem if we don't do that. First of all, we're robbing people of their ability to serve God if we don't appoint people to do things. Now, I know over the years I've had people in the college I've asked to do certain things for the college, and they were enthusiastic and then did it for a couple of weeks and then just quit doing it. It wasn't paid positions, and so I guess they felt like they're not getting paid for it, it's not important. But it was important, and I've had many over the years who just walked away from it. Where, and it's hard because if you have a ministry to do, God expects you to do that ministry, and just to walk away from it, it's not a good idea. Moses had a responsibility to judge the people, but he couldn't do it all himself. So he saw the wisdom in appointing other judges to help him during these situations. As I've read this already, but they were to sanctify themselves for a visit from God. Sanctify, set themselves apart unto God. Prepare their hearts spiritually. Moses and all Israel stood in awe on Mount Sinai. I mean, a very important place historically for Israel. They blew the shofar, the trumpet, the ram's horn. The mountain shook with a violent earthquake. Again, you see all these things take place, and you see the presence of God shown here. The mountain shook. You'd think that the people here would be eager to serve God and afraid not to. But when these events took place, they all turned to the mountain, and everything looked fine. But it wasn't long before they turned their back on it. The Constitution that God gave, the Old Testament laws, the 613 Old Testament laws, are divided up into 3 codes. The moral code, the social code, and the spiritual code. And we'll look at each one of these codes individually here. The moral code was a revelation of God's law. Not only the 10 Commandments, but all the different laws that they had to follow. The social code involved the regulation of the law, how it would be applied. And then the spiritual code, the realization of the law in Christ, how it would point towards Him. Think that, not that I'm come to destroy the law or the prophets. I'm not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So the Old Testament law was not destroyed. It was fulfilled by Jesus Christ. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, not one jot or one tittle shall no wise pass from the law till all be fulfilled. In Romans 10:4, for Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believeth. So Jesus Christ being fulfillment of the law, that's why we're not under those 613 laws as such. Now, some of them do apply to us today. I mean, murder and stealing and lying. Yes, they do apply to us today. But the 613 laws, the dietary laws, don't apply to us today. Well, what many people refer to as the Decalogue. I'm not sure why we do, but that's what we do. Because deca means 10 and log means words. So the Decalogue means 10 words, but it's the 10 Commandments. Consisted of the moral code. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor thy father and thy mother. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Thou shalt not covet. Just a summary of each one of those commands. There's much more wording. You go to Exodus chapter 120. You find much more wording to them than just these synopsis of it. The social code dealt with how they lived with each other. The community laws, Exodus 21 through 23. How it dealt with individuals in motherhood. Leviticus 12, how they dealt with lepers. 13, 14, how the priests were to be dealt with in 21 and 22. The master-servant relationship in Exodus 21, we call that the employee-employer relationship. But personal purity is dealt with regarding sex, Leviticus 18, 20, chapter 18 and chapter 20. Unclean issues, Leviticus 15. Personal injuries. If somebody was hurt on somebody's property, hurt by an animal, or if they, on the rooftop, they didn't have a fence on the rooftop and somebody fell off the rooftop, the person who owned the house was liable for it. Property rights, Exodus 22. the animals themselves, what was clean and unclean, how they had to be killed, Leviticus 17, how the blood had to be drained out of the animal. The land itself, the usage of the land, Leviticus 25. The results of obedience and the land, how that if they were obedient to God, they stayed in the land. When they were disobedient, God would send them into captivity, which Leviticus 26, 14 through 39, the results of disobedience in the land. They weren't guaranteed to live in the land. They were guaranteed the land for future Israel, but they personally were not guaranteed to live in the land. Laws concerning blasphemy, we see that in Leviticus 20 and 24. The importance of making vows, but also the importance of keeping your vow if you did make one, in Leviticus 27. The Sabbath day laws in Exodus 23 and 31, not just weekly Sabbath day, but the holy days, the high days, Sabbath days such as Passover, Yom Kippur, various different festivals, tabernacles. As I said before, law consists of three codes: the moral code, social code, and a spiritual code. And the importance of allowing the law to be a daily part of a person's life, and thus requiring a knowledge of the Word of God. Since they had to follow these rules, they needed to personally know the Word of God. That was the importance of studying the Bible. The third division of the law and that's the spiritual code. Of course, involved Israel's worship, how they were to worship God. Man doesn't have the right to choose how to worship God on their own. God requires specific ways to worship Him. Now, there's some leeway as far as what times we worship today, what time church services, what have you. But in the Old Testament, God was very strict with Sabbath day worship. He's very strict on traveling on the Sabbath day. He's very strict on what animals could or could not be offered up for sacrifice. So Exodus 24 through 31 and then 34 through 40, God dealt with the feasts and the different sacrifices for those feasts, such as Feast of Tabernacles, Passover, what have you. And then He confirmed His covenant with Israel by building an altar with 12 pillars to represent the tribes of Israel in Exodus 24, 3 through 8. The leadership was important. The lineage was important. What tribe you were from became extremely important. It designated where you would live at in Israel once they got into the Promised Land. It designated who could be a king, tribe of Judah, properly be a king. It designated, of course, who would be the priest, and also designated what family the high priest would come from. So you have Moses, Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu. Nadab and Abihu were two sons of Aaron. And then the 70 elders that were appointed. And each of these saw the glory of God in verse 20 or chapter 24. And they saw the God of Israel, and there was under His feet, as it were, a paved work of sapphire stone, as it were the body of heaven in His clearness. So not only did Moses see this, but Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, who eventually would die for their sin, offering up strange fire to God. Then the leadership saw the presence, the glory of God. And the prostitution of Israel, the failure of Israel. Moses had to deal with this crisis. He goes up to the mountaintop and talks to God, brings back the Ten Commandments, and you think he'd be coming back to a people who are excited about God being in their presence, them being in the presence of God, excited about being brought out of Egypt and brought into a land, and they're basically on their way up to the Promised Land. Hadn't been that long since they left Egypt. But immediately upon his return from getting the Ten Commandments, Moses had to deal with this crisis. Yeah. Just threw this in for a little comedy here. He said, look, all I heard was, make us a golden calf to worship. So he made a golden calf. Anyway. The specifics of the tragedy. Idolatry. Israel violated the vertical laws against God. Man's relationship with God was hindered. Immorality, sexual perversions. Israel violated the horizontal laws, or the sins against man. The sins against God, sins against man. Remember 1 John, we say we have fellowship with him, walk in darkness, we lie and do not the truth. But if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship one with another. And the blood of Jesus Christ, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. So, in order for us to be in fellowship, not only do we have to be in fellowship vertically with God, but we have to be in fellowship horizontally with mankind. You can't have one or the other. You have to have both. Of course, their punishment came because sin has a price. And there's always consequences to sin, whether we see them or we don't. We hide ourselves from seeing them. We act like there's no consequence there, but you know, the ability not to pray is a major consequence to sin. But due to this idolatry, sins against God, and the immorality, the sins against man, Moses did 5 things. Of course, he threw down the 2 tablets. He melted down the golden calf, ground it into powder, then mixed it in the water, and made the people drink it. So all these earrings and all the jewelry that they put together to make this golden calf. And I don't know how big it was, but God had a sense of humor about it, made them drink it. He rebuked Aaron for his part. Remember, Aaron, he was guilty as well. It's really amazing that God did not kill Aaron at this point, being the high priest. And Aaron's excuse was, well, just put this golden fire and the calf jumped out. Yeah, that's what happened. Well, no, it's not what happened. And then Moses had men of Levi, the priestly tribe, execute 3,000 who had instigated the matter. That's why I'm really amazed that Aaron wasn't a part of this. For whatever reason, God allowed Aaron to live. But those who started the trouble paid the greater penalty. Again, if we lived in a world where people paid the price for what they did wrong, whether jail time or fine or what have you, a whole lot less people would follow after them. And people don't care, and they don't think it's their fault. It's the government, or it's the police, it's this or that. When the reality of it is they're the ones responsible for their actions. Their sin against God was violated the first 3 commandments. Idolatry, graven image, and they blaspheme God's name, profane God's name. And we have a lot of that going on today. A lot of idolatry today. Graven images. People hold what they have in higher esteem than God. And then the blasphemy. I mean, it's just constant today. All over the TV, all over the media, everybody's mouth. You talk to people in church, speak lightly, using God's name in vain, and act like it doesn't matter. The law for the priest was to remind the priest that God must be treated as holy and be honored. If the priests did their job, they honored God as holy. They honored Him for who He is. And then their responsibility was to teach the people. Israel would have been a whole lot better off if people listened to the priesthood and after the priesthood listened to God. Then Moses said unto Aaron, This is it that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron listened to God. He held his peace. For individuals, they were instructed about worship, how to worship, when to worship, what to bring when they worship, to sanctify God in their hearts, to live a clean life, to make atonement by offering up his sacrifices. And very, very importantly, a holy living, sanctified, set apart unto God. For I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore sanctify yourselves. You shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. Holy living. For the nation as a whole, God will remind them of their obligations to his covenants. The laws that God gave. And how they had a responsibility to keep those laws. How they would remain in the land if they served God. How they would be kicked out of the land if they failed. Later on, Deuteronomy 28, the blessings and cursings chapter. After doings of the land of Egypt, wherein you dwelt, shall you not do. So in other words, the lifestyle that you had in Egypt, that's gone. You don't do those anymore. And I believe Egypt in the Bible, maybe it's just my speculation, but I think the illustration holds up pretty well. But Egypt in the Bible, I believe, is a picture of the world. And going into the promised land, Canaan, is a picture of the Christian life. It's not a picture of heaven, as some of our hymns tend to say, but rather a picture of the Christian life. When we get saved, before we get saved, we're in Egypt. After we get saved, we're to leave Egypt, leave the world. And then we go into the promised land. What did the children of Israel have to do once they entered the promised land? Well, they had to put on the armor. They had to prepare themselves for battle. It wasn't a picture of heaven, but rather a picture of the Christian life. Ephesians 6 says we're to put on the whole armor of God. It means we're in a battle today. We can't just sit back and expect God to fight all their battles for us. It's our responsibility to do that. God promises us the victory, but he tells us we have to be involved in the fight. And then the law was given for God's culture, to instruct Israel to establish their culture, their way of life, by narrating the revelation and the first steps in approaching into God's presence, as well as the revelation of living with God. How God has revealed himself to them and their responsibility in that revelation. How it was important for them to live a holy life, sanctified unto God. A lot of things took place here in these beginning days of Israel. at Mount Sinai. We'll look more into this next week.